Hello, welcome to today's webinar, Being Relevant Drives Business, an introduction to the Coveo Relevance Maturity Model. My name is Mark Floysand, I'm CMO here at Coveo, and I'll be your host and moderator for today. Very much looking forward to welcoming Louis Tetu, our CEO, to take us through the formal session of today's webinar. Before we do so, however, just a few logistics. Feel free to enter questions into the question panel on the right-hand side, and as moderator, I'll tackle those as we go through the course of the webinar. If we have time at the end, we'll take a few live as well. And we will be recording today's webinar, so you will receive a link to the recording within the next 24 hours. Feel free to forward that to your colleagues that weren't able to attend today. So with that, as I say, I'm honored to be joined here by Louis Tetu, our CEO. And with that, let me hand over to Louis. Louis.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mark. So the topic today is around relevance, and I'd like to start at a very high level by talking about the importance of relevance in business. And starting with the idea that basically every business is relevant. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in business. So businesses exist for a reason, and they're pertinent to customers in particular situations with products, services, etc. The essence here is that that relevance is not always translated in the digital experience, and so businesses, albeit relevant, sometimes make it hard for customers to figure out how they can cater to particular needs and so on. Internally, they also often fail at letting employees know how relevant they are, in the sense that knowledge sharing, knowledge access gets to be very, very difficult, oftentimes through the intranet, contact center systems, knowledge bases, etc. And that takes a whole lot of importance, because that is how employees can exercise judgment facing various situations. So the more relevance and the rich and relevant information experience can be accessed by employees, the more they can do on their own, basically facing more and more complex situations. So our argument here is that relevance is really, as Forrester puts it here, the currency of the digital age. Is that, you know, all the information, knowledge that can be pertinent to an individual, whether outside or inside an organization, needs to be accessed in the context of what their needs are, in the context of what they do. And I'd like to illustrate that with the Amazon paradigm, which is all well known to all of us. Essentially, Amazon pioneered the concept of relevance and as we will see, personalization. Amazon really took retail into the era of personalization. If you go back 15 years ago, retail was about mass retail, where you could get, you know, low price, low touch type of commerce, and then you had to go to boutiques of all sorts in order to get personalized service. Amazon sort of turned retail on its head in many ways, and this is not an understatement. Obviously, by essentially driving a personalized experience into mass retail. So Amazon can sell one unit of everything across the world, and yet as you click and you search and you purchase, Amazon makes a note of your behavior and will use that information in order to recommend the next thing that they believe you will buy. And that's obviously on the retail side of Amazon. So that same concept is what we want to apply here to driving rich and personalized information in business. And from that perspective, driving a rich and relevant information experience digitally for businesses is obviously search-driven. Search is the technology underneath, in fact, that rich information experience that can bring information that is pertinent to people, and that truly drives, that relevance. And relevance is really the business currency here. What we're talking about today here is the idea that, to a degree, companies don't always realize that cheap or deficient or suboptimal search mechanisms within their businesses can be very, very expensive. Cheap search, in fact, can affect business economics in many, many ways. So if we take a couple of examples here, obviously I'll start with e-commerce. On commerce sites, when the information cannot be obtained fast enough or pertinent enough, obviously customers don't buy, or worse, they leave. On customer self-service, when customers cannot get online the information they need to solve their issues, they obviously either, again, leave, or they log a call into the contact center, which drives a more frustrating experience for them and obviously triggers a lot of cost in the contact center. So we could apply that same concept to a lot of what you see here on the left-hand side as far as the external-facing digital experience and lack of richness around that experience on websites and etc. As well, equally important internally, I'll start with the right-hand side. The intranet is typically, in many companies, not delivering the kind of relevance, pertinence, intelligence that employees need, and oftentimes, in fact, they need to go outside of these sources of information to get the job done. And so the same applies to contact centers. The economics here are clearly measured in terms of first call resolution, in terms of average call handling time, in terms of escalations. Those are all costs that are, in a way, very much related to, in fact, the inability of systems and digital experiences to provide employees with the information they need, in the case of a contact center, to sell something or to solve a customer issue. So relevance is really at the heart of this. Relevance drives personalization, and the easiest way to understand personalization is, I need information for me. I need information that takes into account my profile, who I am, etc. If I'm from New Orleans, LA, or Frankfurt, Germany, obviously that might affect my information experience and the type of information that I need. Relevance also is associated with context or the task at hand. I'm trying to buy something. I'm trying to solve an issue. I'm trying to design something. Whatever the context or the task at hand here, it could be I'm trying to cure a patient, for instance. So that is the context and the task, and we can go a long way with machine learning and analytics here and contextual relevance to adapt the information experience to that. And then lastly, there's a ton of knowledge, and there's a ton of value in the sum of interactions that your company has with both employees internally as well as customers and prospects and partners and dealers externally. And that basically is the sum of all the click streams and the outcomes and so on, exactly what Amazon does. When you purchase something on Amazon, you are effectively compared with people that behave somewhat like you in order to recommend the same thing. So that wisdom of the digital crowd is captured in the sum of these interactions and so on, and can help us derive the likely intent, basically, of an individual as we create the information experience. So all of that is what we call here, from a technology perspective, AI-powered search. Over the past 5 years, there have been very substantial advances in the search area from a technology perspective, and those advances, in fact, are moving companies from the left-hand side to the right-hand side on what we call the cognitive computing model. If you think about cognitive computing in general, there are various models out there, obviously. At Coveo, we believe in the 4-tier model of responsive, proactive, predictive, and then ultimately prescriptive, which is the idea that if you think about all the information available, responsive means that, you know, every time on every interaction on your website, on your intranet, in your CRM, contact center, etc., you can put your best foot forward. You can deliver the best available answer to a question. And that really makes people more efficient. That is the fundamental value prop of search in itself at an entry level is time saver. Google-like answers, reaching all the information at once, and really gaining time to access information. It gets really interesting when you start being proactive with that, because the search experience of a user provides you a lot of information around what that user's particular interests are. And so knowing, for instance, what results a user has ultimately navigated to allows us to, in fact, go and fetch related content and then proactively push suggestions. So since you're interested in this, and given your task, your profile, here are some people you should talk to because they too are related to this content. Or here's some content that you might also be interested in, and we can do that with technologies such as search and text analytics, for instance, and again contextual relevance, and we'll come back on that. Then moving forward, as people use this, as I mentioned before, a lot of that wisdom of the digital crowd gets accumulated in usage analytics, and then machine learning can obviously match the behavior of a certain individual against a cohort of people that kind of behave the same way, and derive from that the likely next thing that individual will be interested in. And then we get in the world of predictive, the world of recommendations, which is really the difference between suggestions and recommendations is that recommendations in this case are really data-driven. They are the result of analytics, machine learning, and as you get in the world of recommendations, you are truly expanding a user's thinking, so to speak, where a user came in initially with a question, and because you're responsive, you provided, you know, the right and relevant answer and best available answer to that individual. But ultimately, you know, you can predict what their next question will be, or what their next likely action will be, and that's the world of predictive. Prescriptive, obviously, at the last step of my cognitive model, is a more formal, authoritative recommendation, so to speak. Take this pill, drive this car, turn right, turn left. So the world of prescriptive is far more authoritative, and obviously we get beyond here the world of decision support per se. And so what we're introducing is here on this webinar is the relevance maturity model. The idea that, you know, understanding the importance of relevance and driving relevance to every interaction and outside and inside the company across all digital experiences, we understand that, you know, as the slide said a little earlier, cheap search can be very expensive. cheap search can have, and sort of lack of relevance can have a high negative impact, as you can see here below. It affects deflection, click-throughs, conversions, lack of relevance on an internet, creates work redundancy, escalations. It affects innovation. People cannot recuperate basically the collective knowledge. And so in order to move along the relevancy curve, the first step is basically to enable secure unified ranking, because as you cut across multiple information silos within an organization, you quickly find that there is a need to rank information from various diverse sources. And so in order to compare those, in fact, and be able to rank them, you cannot just federate sources to multiple search engines. You need to bring it all together, basically, so that you can rank the information. For instance, the ability to rank against a customer issue, a knowledge article versus an engineering piece of data, or versus a customer post, for instance, which could all, or a YouTube video for that matter, which could all be useful in terms of being case resolving. So the ability to unify information, and as we will see, through a common index in a very secure way, obviously, and rank those is critical to make companies more responsive and relevant. But the second step is then to add on top of that powerful advanced navigation. And the reason is very simple. Relevance fundamentally at the entry level is in the eyes of the beholder. People, when they're online, know what they're looking for. They know what's relevant to them. If they know about something, it's obviously less relevant to find it again. And so, everybody has a personal set of background and knowledge as a starting point. And so the ability to navigate is very, very critical. The rich facets, all the query suggestions, the ability to view content very, very quickly, navigate tabs, and the ability to fold and group information in very flexible ways is very, very important. And at this point, we call that CRMM level 2, which is you've got unified access to information. And then as a second step, you're providing users with an ability to navigate through that. Then for us, the third one and the fourth one are in the area of tunable relevance and what we call contextual relevance. So tunable relevance starts refining results by adapting the relevance, pertinence of information that's being pushed, using programmatic ways to further filter or refine. So depending on, as I said before, your profile, for instance, or your any kind of locale, maybe the products you bought, or something of that nature, for instance, will drive certain rules around how we will filter out, or in fact, alternatively, promote certain types of information, and that's called tunable relevance. The next step is to bring that in context, and we will show you in a few minutes a number of examples around that. Bringing that in context means that the system of engagement that the user is in, so whether it's a website, a customer community, a CRM, a drug management system, a shipment management system, whatever that might be, there is a context around an object and sort of an anchor object. It could be a patient, for instance, or a case, or an account. That context tells you a lot about the task and the goal of that task. And so you can start bringing in task contextual information. The task itself provides a lot of signals that will allow us to further refine the relevance, and in fact ultimately take that into product. We will show you in a few minutes how Adobe now ships Photoshop with the Coveo technology so that, in fact, users of various backgrounds and levels of expertise dealing with Photoshop will actually get a different set of results, and that's called in-product contextual relevance. And that's, to us, the level 4 that helps make companies get companies into the proactive area. The 5th step and the 6th step now start getting in the area of suggestions and recommendations, where, as I mentioned before, suggestions can bring up related content, basically stuff you didn't ask for, but that, systems can start figuring out that they're somewhat related. So the classic example is finding people who knows what about what within an organization. So if you're working in a 10,000 people organization, it might be very useful to understand that there's someone in Bangalore who actually has some expertise around the types of topics that you're working on. And so those are contextual suggestions. Obviously, they can be products, services, people, etc., content, documents of all sorts. And then finally, as we accumulate, in fact, data from the crowd and understand their information and search journey from the original intent to the final outcome, we store that into large cloud-based analytics databases, and then machine learning starts to work to, in fact, self-learn and further refine and auto-tune recommendations. And obviously that becomes the ultimate in terms of delivering information proactively and in a more relevant way. And this is exactly what, again, sites like Amazon use to recommend the next thing that you will likely purchase. When you buy, let's say, a washer and dryer on Amazon as opposed to other sites, other sites will say, well, this dryer, because of the taxonomy and et cetera, is linked to that product family and goes along with the washer, so I'm going to recommend it to you. Amazon will come to the same conclusion, but with a very different tap. In fact, it will figure out that people who actually were searching for that particular washer in that particular area and et cetera ended up buying that dryer and or at least clicking on it and et cetera, and that's why they will likely promote it and recommend it. So leaders, in fact, walk through that entire journey. The nice thing, in fact, this is not necessarily sequential. You start working on number 6 as soon as you enable number 2. But really, that's a way to look at relevance and driving relevance across various digital experiences, both outside and inside a company. And the good news is that as you move to the right-hand side, it becomes actually easier because you're not trying to manually cure data. You're letting, in fact, data work for you. And machine learning, again, has made major advances to deliver on that. So AI-powered search is contextual, predictive, and relevant. So essentially what you're doing here is you're not only enabling search. Search is about content. As we said before, it's about efficiency. Here's the information you're searching for, and you get it back. And that's essentially the value proposition of search. It's around content. Relevance is around proficiency. Relevance is around making people do more on their own by pushing a richer information experience so that suddenly they're starting to buy things they didn't think they needed, and the fact is they do, and they can solve more complex issues on their own, and they can design more complex things and et cetera. So how do we recommend, how do we start learning and understanding your context, not only your question, but obviously your task, your context, and your likely intent, and basically push relevant information against it. And that's a very, very exciting science. We call it at Coveo the idea of delivering YC-Win. What you see is what you need next, more so than what you see is what you asked for. And that's a very, very powerful concept story that we've implemented across now more than 1,000 installations across the world. And the way this works is reasonably simple to understand. We keep the complexity under the hood, obviously. But essentially, if you look on the left-hand side, what we do is we reach what we call the ecosystem of record. There's no longer anything called a system of record. Data silos, information silos proliferate, and there's on-prem, there's cloud, there's structured, unstructured information. We call that the ecosystem of record, and companies like Coveo have built a science around connectivity, around secure connectivity to crawl that content and bring it together in a unified cloud that is encrypted, obviously, both at rest and in transit, and is even HIPAA compliant in our case to handle things like medical records and so on. So it is a secure way to mash up information very quickly on demand. And then if you look on the upper left-hand side, what we do with that and unified, tunable, and contextual ranking is we can deliver contextual sets and contextual relevance using the content. Now, what's interesting is as we fire up the platform, then as users start navigating and so on, we accumulate the behavioral data. We accumulate every click stream, every click through. We accumulate the entire journey from the original intent, and that's the beauty of search. Search gives you the intent and the context. Sometimes it doesn't need a query. It's just a context that gives you the likely intent. And so we accumulate all of that all the way to the business journeys, and then the machine learning on the upper right can start delivering and pushing predictive intelligence. And that's how a platform like Coveo works, in fact, to deliver on relevance. Now, the question is, how do we measure relevance? Because, everybody wants an ROI and et cetera. In the world of relevance, the dichotomy is that, it's kind of a general problem that's nobody's responsibility and everybody's responsibility at the same time. In other terms, in many areas, in plain English, nobody gets fired for having lack of relevance on an intranet or something like that, albeit the cost is humongous. It ranges in the millions and tens of millions of dollars in losses or redundancy or lack of efficiency. There is a way to measure that, and the way to measure that is by closing the loop with analytics and starting to understand essentially what information matters to people in what circumstance over time, and understanding basically how they complete their information journey all the way to an outcome. An outcome, for instance, can be called deflection, as an example, on a self-service community. The more you make the self-service community intelligent, the less likely the customers, or the more likely customers will solve issues on their own, the less likely they will hit the contact center. The same is true for contact center intelligence pushed to agents and so on. So we at Coveo have deployed this into a large number of organizations across the tech sector, financial services, manufacturing, now the healthcare sector with all the compliance that's required and so on, and driving very, very important metrics. I want to show you a couple of examples to illustrate that. As you obviously, relevance is not something tangible until you experience it. So from a look and feel perspective, all websites pretty much feel the same. But one website could be the exact same with poor information, relevance, and pertinence, and the other one could be the exact same with rich information. So as you start firing up analytics and machine learning, for instance, a website like, as you can see here, the Sub-Zero Wolf website here, suddenly as you pop up this barbecue in the menu, this barbecue can take into account that you're from New York, or you're from Montreal, or you're from LA. And it can take into account that you've also navigated other families of products and et cetera. And hence, the barbecue that we're going to show you is more likely to fit your needs because you're matching, your behavior is matching the behavior of somebody else. I like to use this example in the cosmetics industry. And the question we always use is how do how do you propose and sell a cream to a woman who just bought a lipstick in New Orleans, and some other cosmetics? So this is not something you can do with standard taxonomy or product families, because lipsticks and creams are obviously different product families and somewhat unrelated. This is something that is far more behavioral, in fact, where you can start figuring out that, you know, a customer, you know, will navigate through certain products, and you will likely derive certain skin color and et cetera, but just by matching their behavior and ultimately being able to recommend, you know, the cream that these types of cohorts have purchased most often, and then recommend these products. And this is really what we mean by relevance. And in this case, you know, this is, you know, this kind of technology is really, really important, because we're talking about click-throughs and click ranks improvements of 15, 20, 25% sometimes, and that is massive in terms of serving, you know, customers in a more personalized way. I want to talk about what we do with Adobe. And Adobe has been a long time partner and customer of ours at Coveo, and running their customer communities and a lot of the information for their self-service on their website. What Adobe decided to do, and credits to them in terms of the intelligence here, was to take, in fact, that concept and the personalization of search, the ultimate personalization, into the product. So if you're a Photoshop user, you can be a weekend photographer, or you can be a very advanced user, lab specialist, or so on. As you click and as you request information, etc., we start looking at your behavior, and so the information in product that gets pushed to the user is in fact better aligned with the behavior of that user. So for instance, you know, help on crop would not necessarily deliver the same results to different categories of product users as before. And this is what we call in-product relevance, in-product search and intelligence. This is an example where Hershey's, for instance, has been deploying an intranet for 10,000 people. It looks the same as a regular intranet. So it has navigation across, as you can see here, across all sorts of sources, and there are many more than what's shown here on the screen. You can see SharePoint, you can see Microsoft Dell, you can see email, etc. But the beauty of this is that behind the scenes, there's a lot of intelligence at work to start understanding what people do. So if you look at an intranet like this, for instance, as you look for smartwatch and you navigate on the left-hand side here, and you start looking at those results, we can actually start looking at the content of these results and the themes you're interested in, and basically start recommending related content, related search. So enriching the experience. In other terms, you're interested in smartwatches, you should probably, you know, look for wearable technology, because this is somewhat related in terms of theme. And over time, as you fire up analytics and et cetera, we're going to start gathering information about your work. We're going to start, you know, creating an intranet that learns, that becomes intelligent as it relates to what every individual worker is doing, what their topics of interest are. And ultimately, we're able to create sort of a knowledge graph of people and understand who knows what about what across a company. And of course, you know, in return, we're able to recommend these people to, you know, other people where, you know, they might be relevant, with whom they might be relevant. And so that applies to, think about this in a contact center scheme, for instance, where you've got contact centers deployed worldwide. And suddenly, you know, an agent not only gets pushed case resolving content and information, but also other agents elsewhere in the world that potentially are very familiar with that type of issue. And this is what we have at GoPro Camera, for instance. This is an example with Salesforce.com Service Cloud, where in this case Coveo is fully embedded, and the relevance here is contextual, because information here, even before the agent does a search, information from Salesforce, similar cases from Confluence, from YouTube, it could be, anything, DB2, Oracle, Inquira, any other, it could even be, old Siebel information that gets automatically pushed into Salesforce, but more importantly is contextually relevant to that case. And so as people use this, in fact, this gets better and better thanks to the analytics and the machine learning. And then on the front end, same thing to drive the experience. When we say helpful articles, again, it all looks the same. But the articles that are here are more likely to be helpful because they take into account the actual interaction journey of that specific user, and then in order to drive personalization. So, Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you. His goal here was to provide a few examples and walk people through the maturity model. Hopefully, that's been very useful. Thank you.
Louis, thank you very much for that comprehensive view into being relevant and how that drives business economics, and giving us that intro to the Coveo Relevance Maturity Model. I'd just like to remind everybody that it has been recorded and that we will send a link out. If you have further questions and would like to follow up, please don't hesitate to contact us or contact your nearest Coveo rep. We really appreciate your time on the call today, and thank you very much.